What's up, guys? Max here, and today we are doing a review of this 2005 Kawasaki ZX-6R. So first things first, let's cue up the walk around. Alright, now you guys know that this bike looks like completely naked. In fact, every single piece of plastic pretty much, except for the tank shroud, has been removed from this bike by the previous owner due to, I don't know, accident or deteriorated or what. But here's a picture real quick of what this bike should look like fully fared. And in my opinion, it's a fairly handsome bike. You know, I'm not a huge fan of Cowies. As some of you already know, I'm not a big fan of Cowies. But I always had a soft spot for this bike, and so before we get into all of that, let's cover some of the technical specifications. This is a 2005 Kawasaki ZX-6R. That means it is the 636 displacement bike or cheater bike. Let's see. It has 636cc inline 4. It is of this year. They made both a ZX-6R and a ZX-6RR. The RR is the 600cc bike. This bike makes something like 115 horsepower and 50 pound-feet of torque, which gives it, basically, it's a little bit more torquey than a standard 600, which makes it more of a favorite on the street compared to the 600. Let's see, it's got fully adjusted, it's got the same suspensions, it's, you know, fully adjustable 41mm forks up front. You know, you got a full adjustment single shock in the rear, 300mm brakes up front. I think it's got like a 220 in the rear. Nothing really exceptional. The bike weighs in dry at about 410 pounds. I think that with full gas and trim and everything, is probably closer to the 440 range, which puts it a little on the heavier side, but not really for the mid-2000s. It's kind of what you would expect of bikes of that generation. And I only put like a little bit of gas in it, and apparently we are at the low fuel point, so I need to find a spot to pull over and put a little more drink in the girl. But so anyway, now that we have the technical stuff out of the way, let's talk about what this bike is. So, as everybody knows, the major sports bike classes are set by international racing, so AMA, World Superbike, and so on and so forth. But, so you have the generic 600 class, you have the 250 class, you have the 600 class, and you have the world class or 1000cc or leader bike class, depending on how you want to call it. But there are manufacturers that make basically street bikes that kind of don't really fit into any of these amalgamated classes. So, for instance, Triumph makes the Daytona Street Triple, which is a 675. Obviously, Suzuki makes the GSX-R 750, that even though it doesn't officially fit in any race category, has had a very successful race history. So Kawasaki decided to enter that field, and what they did was, I believe this thing has a different stroke. I think it's an overstroked engine, which bumps it up to 636 cc's. I believe also the cam and the timing is revised to give it a little bit more grunt at the expense of some of the top end. This gauge supposedly goes to 17,000 RPM. There's no way in hell this bike will hit that. And it's not really for hitting that, right? It's more interested in kind of city-ish, you know, and highway pulling, and I will say this bike feels better than any 600 I've ever been on, and that's the reason it's got the nickname of a cheater bike. I've heard, you know, a lot of people refer to the ZX-6R as a cheater bike because it's basically a 600 with a very small displacement bump that gives it a little bit of an advantage in terms of generating low-end torque. It's still a fully fared race bike. It still has all the nice goodies, so it's not a stripped down. It's not cheap, but it is a little bit, little different to ride. So let me put some gas in this, and we'll get started again. All right, so now we're back on the road with a full tank of gas. We can talk about the bike a little bit more. So I've told you guys all the technical stuff, but what does it really mean to ride it around? And I think that this bike, to me, kind of exemplifies what I like to see in a middleweight kind of engine configuration. So when you that first initial crank, regardless of what gear you're in, it just feels a little bit stronger than you'd expect from a normal 600 class. I mean, it's not a liter bike and it's not a 750, but it does pull quite nicely ahead. So I also have to admit I'm cheating a little bit because this bike is geared up. So an OEM one may or may not have quite as good response. But it definitely feels like it's got more torque than just kind of your generic 600. And when I say generic 600, I'm really comparing it to me. The ZX-6R 600 is the kind of it's kind of the point setter, if you will. I have a lot of experience with Suzuki's in all the different configurations, different engine displacements. So whenever you guys hear me compare it, like kind of generically, that's the target that I'm hitting. So when I say that this thing pulls better out of a hole, I'm comparing it to the ZX-600. And so let me talk about riding position real quick. The thing I don't like about the Kawis, and it's true here as well, is I feel like my arms are really stretched and my legs are really tight. And to me, this is something I've seen on the ZX-10R, the ZX-6R. I've had one of those, the old ZX-9s. I don't know what it is about Kawasaki, but they kind of assume that people are kind of I don't know, kind of chimpanzee-like in the sense that we have these super long arms, but at the same time really short feet, or really short legs, excuse me. But I think that this right here is also kind of where this bike comes into its element, this kind of top gear. There's power on demand. There's absolutely no need to downshift this bike out of 6th gear. There is quite a bit of heat on my right leg because this has one of those where the exhaust runs up the side and then out the back. It's an undertail exhaust. But interestingly enough, my butt is fine. It's my leg that's getting a little toasty right now. The other thing is this bike has an incredible cooling. Either this bike has an incredible cooling system, or the thermostat doesn't read very accurately. It's one or the other, because I mean, in the garage with the fan on, this thing won't get over 185, 190, which is, I mean, even the fan doesn't kick on just with like my box fan on, which is really pretty phenomenal, because the Hondas and stuff will easily get into the low 200s. So it's a very big, very effective radiator and cooling system in general, I guess. So we've talked about the riding position, talked about the engine a little bit. Transmission is your standard 6-speed sequential mesh gearbox, wet clutch. I've noticed on this bike and on the ZX-9 I had, the clutch is a little grabby at its engagement point. I'm hesitant to say that as a generality on all Kawis, but I have noticed it on several models now that it's just, I mean, I'm really feathering it, but it's really not as smooth, I guess, as it could be. I think that's one of the things Suzuki's do really well. They have really smooth clutches. This bike's got 23,000 miles on it, so to say that it's entirely Kawasaki or just age, I don't know. But clutchless upshifts are great. It's very strong. The front brakes have really good initial bite, and they're very strong. They're Tokikos, I believe, a couple of 6-piston units. 6-piston? Maybe 4-piston. I don't know, but they feel like 6-piston. I mean, they have a really good grab, I got the suspension set up for my weight, so there's not a whole lot of a whole lot of nosedive. And just like that, we're in 4th gear, and I just kind of roll on it, and the bike really picks up. This bike is still very top heavy in the sense that once we get past 9 or 10 grand, it really gets on it. But and we're gonna do that here in a second. But it's very manageable down low, you know. So if you're a new rider and you're looking at kind of the 600 class, this would definitely be a bike I would consider looking at, because it's got the grunt down low that you don't feel the need to, you know, we're at what, 3,000 RPM in 4th gear, and I'm just kind of giving a little gas through the turn, and it's coming on just fine for me. So I mean, it's definitely better than any 600 I've ever been on. Is it a leader bike? Absolutely not. But you know, it's also not billed as one either. So the rear brake works pretty well. It's maybe not as grabby as I like, but it might be this master cylinder, because it's a little bit of there's a little bit of tightness there. I was trying to work out when I was going through this bike, and maybe I just never quite worked it out all the way. But you know, the other thing I noticed is I had to change the tires on this bike, because the rear was completely down to the cords, and the front was just basically sun hardened. The wheels on this bike are forged and really light. I mean, I go through a lot of wheels just as part of my business, and I noticed that these are they were just really featherweight. And I don't know if that was just kind of a weird revelation for me, or if it's universally true. Sitting here in traffic, I can feel a little bit of heat rising up on my butt, basically just kind of backdraft from the exhaust. But it's not super uncomfortable. It's about the same as the underseat exhaust Hondas. But I mean, I just can't get over the roll-on of this bike. Another cool feature, technology-wise, is it's got this. Where is it? It's got this, which is a lap counter, and you hit it with this button right here with your thumb, and the lap goes, and you hit it again, it stops, and then you can hit lap, and it just sets a new lap. Oh wow, you can set multiple laps, so you can keep track of your lap times. Which I don't know how safe that is to be doing all that while you're on the track, but you can, I guess, is the point of the story here. And see, that's what I'm talking about. See, we're sitting here in traffic, the fan's not on, but it's holding 199, 200, you know, whereas normally a bike will hit 225, you know, about 210 is when the fans come on, and the bike will hit 225, and that's where it'll hold. But this bike just doesn't seem to do that. I know it's a little bizarre, but I mean, she pulls. She definitely pulls. And once you get up in that 10-12 range, it's not as abrupt, which is something I really like. Compared to the 600s, which can be really pretty abrupt, this bike is not. It feels like there is just a constant stream of torque that is available on demand for you, you know, whenever you should need it. And I really like that. You know, to me, this is a good street bike. This is definitely a bike that I would recommend. You know, when people ask me, they're like, you know, if I want to custom build a Street Fighter, there's not too many Street Fighters of these, probably because of the weird intake snout up here that runs through the headlights. Makes it difficult to kind of customize it, because I believe this out here is still part of the frame, so you'd have to like cut that down or something. But this bike has just so much tractable power, and it's just always on demand for you, and I really like that. So let's see, we've covered pretty much everything in terms of mechanically. In terms of seat comfort, I've been riding for about half an hour now, and my legs are a little tight, and they've been a little tight since the beginning. but it's not the worst thing ever. Let's put it that way. The only thing that I've noticed on this bike that's pretty significant, also in comparison, is the engine braking. It seems to have, and again, this might be because of the gearing, but it seems to have quite a bit more engine braking than I've come to expect out of a 600. If I let off the throttle, it really pulls you down pretty quick, which again, not necessarily a bad thing, but something to keep in mind. This bike also has the stock exhaust on it, and I think it is perfect. I mean, I'm sure it's heavy as shit compared to like a Yoshimura unit or something like that, but this thing has quite a bit of growl for a stock motor, and it's just loud enough that I feel like I can hear the bike when I get on it, which, you know, is kind of the desired result, right? You want to get that little bit of noise going, right? Because it gives you a little bit of adrenaline and puts a smile on your face. But you don't want to be so loudly obnoxious that you're in KTM territory, because I mean, that bike does not make friends everywhere it goes. Let's put it that way. One thing I did notice that I don't like, I like the handle. These clip-ons have a little bit of a downward angle to them, and which is not uncommon, but I really prefer the straight out bars that don't have an angle to them. I feel like it puts a little too much strain on my wrists, to be honest with you, after riding this. Really, if I had to have any sort of discomfort complaint, it would be that. The seat itself is actually really pretty comfortable. Not to say grippy, also because, you know, I recovered it myself. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Because I do amazing work. But I mean, just listen to it. This is definitely, so I have had this bike for probably about 2 weeks. I finished it yesterday. Put this new front tire on it, and that was the last thing I had to do. And now I'm riding and reviewing it for you guys. I listed it on Craigslist about 2 hours ago, and I have a guy by the way, I'm going to start doing this thing. So, average retail value. Let's talk about what these bikes go for. An 0506, in my opinion, is the best generation of this bike. If you get one that's 07 through 2011, it's actually going to make less power, and I don't like the design as much. The 2013 and newer ones are really slick looking, but that's not really a used bike yet. That's basically a pretty new bike. So, talking about these bikes, so 0506, the ZX-6R, what are you going to pay? Again, these numbers are based down here in Texas, but an 0506 bike in good condition with the factory plastics, you know, maybe a few small bruises, but basically all in all, nice bike. Less than 20,000 miles, you are looking at something in the range of $3,500. $3,500 is a good price. I've seen them listed as high as $4,500. I don't think that's really realistic. I think a very, very, very clean one would probably go for closer to $4,000. But I think $3,500 is a good target point. This bike, for example, because it's missing all of its bearings, but otherwise it's mechanically sound, and because it's got 23,000 miles on it, I listed it for $3,000, and like I said, I got a guy coming first thing tomorrow morning to come look at this bike, and he basically told me that this is the bike he's been looking for a while for this bike, and he's coming ready to buy, which, fantastic for me, hell yeah, but that's one of the things I'm going to start adding to these reviews is kind of market value and what these bikes should go for. So I hope you guys like that. That's pretty much it for this review. The summary, bottom line, whatever, to me, this bike in a lot of ways exemplifies the street ability of a 600 class bike. And so I would much rather have this before buying something like, say, an FZ6 as an example. I think that, with a set of dirt bars, this bike would be really a blast. But even in super sport form, it's very easy to ride. It's very mild-mannered. It does not have the jerkiness that a normal 600 has. You're not going to hit this power band where it's going to try to rip your face off. It's very, I won't say it's sedate, because it's definitely aggressive, but it's not mean aggressive. It's predictable, usable, simple aggressive. And so, to me, if I had to have a 600 class bike, this is actually the bike I think I would want to have. So like right there, I just started in second gear and just kind of clutched through it, and it was just fine. You know, this bike's got no problem starting in second gear. And so it gets a little warm, but it's not uncomfortable. I would definitely say that, again, a 600 is pretty aggressive for a first-time rider, but if you had to get a 600, this would probably be the 600 to get. So with that said, I hope you guys like this review. I know a lot of you have these bikes. Feel free to leave me some comments, leave me some feedback. I hope you like the new section on pricing. If there's anything else you want to see in these reviews, leave me a note and we'll see if we can get it done. Peace, guys.